Hey everyone, Steve here. In this video, we're going to talk about how to pass a parameter from a pipeline into a notebook in Microsoft Fabric. We're expanding on a metadata-driven pipeline video we had earlier, and we're now looking on how to use parameters from the pipeline and actually pass them into another tool of a Fabric notebook. So let's get started and we can see how to do this. Now, before we go, if you haven't watched our other video, definitely go check it out on what is metadata-driven pipelines. We'll have a small recap in this video, but if you're unfamiliar with metadata-driven pipelines, definitely worth to check that one out first, because it's going to give you some more context. However, with that said, let's head over and dive straight into it. Before we see the notebook, I want to give a quick recap of how we built our metadata-driven pipeline so far. The first thing that we do is we have a get tables activity. This get tables activity has this bit of SQL that goes to one of our logging warehouses. In our logging warehouse is where we keep all the metadata for the pipeline. And at the moment, if we run this query, what it's going to do is it's going to return us a table of these 4 tables that we want to copy over. We're only looking at the source table and the destination table name at the moment. But again, you could parameterize a lot more than this. The next, it goes to a for each, where it will look at the first line of this return table. And in our for each, so far what we have is that we set our source, which is just the source table, in this case, din customer for line 1. And then we set the destination, which is the destination table, and it's going to be called customer. So a source table is called din customer, and a destination table is called customer. Then we have a copy data. In our current pipeline, we're using a pipeline copy data activity. This is the one we want to replace with our own notebook. And we're going to use our notebook and pass in these 2 parameters. Now, this may not be very useful for pure copy data, but it can be very useful, as you can imagine, with other activities, such as when we're doing data transformations, doing our transformation steps, or doing loggings, this kind of stuff, that we might want a bit more flexibility than the built-in copy data and use our own notebook. With that real quick recap, let's head over to Fabric and have a look on how to do this. Here is our current pipeline. As you can see, as mentioned, we have this get tables activity, which is going to look at the metadata. And then we have this for each, which is going to loop through each of the tables and copy the data over. I'm going to jump into this. And as we look in our copy data here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this current pipeline. So I want to replace that with a notebook. Now I've already pre-written our notebook, and this notebook here is very, very simple. So as we look in, we just have 3 cells in our notebook. The first is very important, and this is the pipeline parameters cell. This is going to have and hold all of the parameters that come in from the pipeline. And right now we just have them as blank because it's not tied yet, and we can actually put in obviously our own tests here, but we're going to have initializer variables. This is where it holds the information passed from the pipeline. We have a very simple query where it just builds a query string. Here we're just doing a simple select star from our source data, which is in this case another lakehouse in our Fabric environment. Usually though, this could be an external or whatever your source data comes from. And then we just run that source query and save it to a table. And here we have destination table is the table name we're going to save it. And here we have source table, right? And these both get passed into the query and into where we save. One thing that we need to do, now we've written it, is in our cell, which is going to hold our parameters, we have an option here. We click in the ellipsis in more commands, and we can actually say toggle parameter cell. And then you'll see here that it labels this as a parameter cell. So this tells Fabric that this is going to be a parameter cell where we hold in past parameters. Now we have our notebook sorted and ready to go. I'm going to head back over to my pipeline, and here I'm going to add a notebook activity. Now, the first thing I'm always going to do is rename this away from notebook 1, give it a useful name. And so this is going to be called copy metadata driven tables. It is quite good to describe this if you're going to hand this off and stuff like that, all good naming practices. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to settings, and I'm using the same workspace. So now I'm going to search for my notebook here and select the correct notebook on the one I've just had. Now we need to tell it that we're going to give it some parameters. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to join it up so that now we have on success. So when we set our other variables, we will now move on to the notebook. In the notebook, I'm going to open up base parameters here. Base parameters is the parameters that get passed into this notebook. I'm going to click new. I'm going to click this twice so that I have two cells available because I'm passing two parameters. You need to name this exactly. So I always say, let's not type. Let's come here, copy the source table. Here, I'm going to say name source table. So the name matches the parameter name in the notebook. Type is a string because this is a text field. And the value, I want this to be that metadata driven as we're looping through. So it's going to be this variable of set source. If I click here, I can click add dynamic content. I just switch over, and there's a lot of dynamic content we could use from anywhere. We have everything saved in a variable. So I'm going to select variables and its source table. So this is that variable which I saved in the step earlier, which gives me the source table name. I do exactly the same thing for my destination table. As I copy this, name this destination table, switch to string, click in the value, open the add dynamic content, go to my variables and select the destination table. And the source table, destination table comes from these variable settings here, where we've defined them earlier. We did this in the last video. Now we're good to go. I've created my new metadata-driven pipeline using a notebook instead of a pipeline activity and dynamically passing in the parameters from this pipeline into that notebook. All I have to do now, click run. It's going to ask me to save it. It's going to validate it, and it's going to run. And we can see if this succeeds. There we have it. Our pipeline has succeeded. If I go, I can see it's run 4 times my copy metadata-driven tables notebook. I can click here on the input. And in this case, we were looking at dim customer and the customer. So the source was dim customer and the destination was called customer. We can see on the output that we see succeeded. We'll have some sort of hard to read metadata here. If I go to the next one along here, we can see that this was the dim product and looking at the product. So looping through all of our tables, that was in our only our own controlled metadata warehouse, meaning that I can reuse this pipeline again across lots of different processes and just change the metadata in the table that we control. There you have it. That is how to pass our parameters from our metadata-driven pipeline into a notebook. Really useful, and there's a lot of different use cases for this if we want to control what sort of transformations that we do, what sort of tables that we use. There is a lot. And the more we can make things metadata driven, the more reusable pipelines across projects and different things that we do, we can actually use these over and over again. not having to copy this same activity multiple times, easy to do loops, easy to make things very dynamic, just update our metadata and it updates the whole process. Thank you very much for watching. Please check out our other videos. We're here every week with new videos and lots of live guests. So please subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.